Hello and welcome to Newsmakers on CHCH Podcast for this Wednesday, December 13th. I'm your host, Louie Butko, and today we're taking a look at the federal government's plan to launch a catalog of pre-approved home designs and bring back post-war efforts when it comes to building homes. And to do that, I'm very pleased to be joined by Senior Director of Policy and Innovation at the Smart Prosperity Institute, Mike Moffatt. It was back in August of this year. Moffatt, who is also assistant professor in the Business Economics and Public Policy Group at Ivy Business School at Western University, spoke on the issue of housing at the federal caucus meetings in Charlottetown, where he called for, among other suggestions, a wartime-like effort needed to build the number of houses needed that the Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation says we need to restore affordability. So he's the perfect guest to break this all down. Professor Moffatt, thank you for making the time. I know you're a very busy guy, especially the last few days. Let's jump right into it with Sean Fraser's announcement yesterday. How significant is this on the grand scheme of things?
Yeah, it's potentially quite transformative. It's one of the things that the group of us who put together the National Housing Accord was recommending. I think it was recommendation number 7. This worked really well after World War II. We found ourselves as a nation in a very similar circumstance today, where we hadn't been building enough homes for about 15 years because of the Depression and the war. And we had a big boom in population with the returning veterans, but also an increase in immigration from war-torn Europe. So we needed to do something and do something big to build more homes. And this was just one of many things that the federal government did at the time. It worked very well back then, and I'm happy to see that the federal government is reintroducing it today.
Now, what can we expect from this? Sean Fraser says that there'll be a kind of a catalog that developers will be able to pick from, builders will be able to pick from. What's the incentive for builders to choose these designs from this catalog?
Money and time, basically. So let's give an example. We know across Canada that fourplexes are being legalized as of right in many cities. But most builders and developers, particularly small ones, won't have pre-existing designs for them. So if the federal government had this catalog, a small-scale builder could say, or developer could say, okay, I want to build, number 17 in that catalog. Get those designs, the next day at nominal charge from the federal government, saving them hundreds of thousands of dollars and months of architectural time. And then once they go to build these things, let's say they need to get financing from the federal government, from the CMHC. Well, the federal government's already pre-approved that design. It actually takes out an entire approvals step from the federal government. So it can save them months of time there. And that's really what this is meant to accomplish. It lowers the cost of construction, but it also streamlines the approvals process so that builders and developers can get shovels in the ground faster.
Now, what's different about what was happening in the 40s, though? I mean, wasn't it the government that was building these houses back in the 40s? The government doesn't seem to say that we'll build them. Is that fair? Is that true that this is quite different than what we saw back in the day, though?
Well, so not necessarily, no. So actually, Most of those homes were not built by the government, though some of them were, particularly the ones as part of the I can't remember the wartime housing effort from about 1947 to 1960. Absolutely, the federal government was building some of these, but these plans were available to all. So any builder or developer or just handyman could go out and get these plans. So because of that, many of these were built by the private sector. So it's a suite of policies that the federal government used back in the 40s and 50s. The catalog was one of the suite of policies, but so too, you're absolutely right. So too was the direct building of housing, and that's not what the federal government has introduced here. They've only reintroduced the catalog component.
Now, the CMHC has said we need 5.8 million homes by 2030. As you wrote in your piece back in August when you called on these changes to restore affordability. That seems to be the issue that a lot of people are facing with mortgage rates and renewing your mortgage rates and just not being able to afford a house. How will this help make homes more affordable? Just straight up.
Yeah, so I mean, there's some things it won't do. Obviously, it doesn't affect interest rates. It doesn't affect land costs, and there's a lot of inputs that go into building a house. But there are others that architectural costs are part of those costs. This lowers those. A lot of the costs are the cost of obtaining approvals. Anything from building permits to CMHC approvals. This reduces the time of getting those, and since time is money, it reduces those costs, and potentially could reduce other costs as well if the federal government does a good job of implementing this. So ideally, the designs in this catalog should be made in such a way that these homes aren't particularly labor intensive to build, that they're really simplified, streamlined designs that incorporate new technologies like panelization and so on that are less labor intensive to build. So it could reduce the labor cost of building homes, not because it's driving down wages, but because it's taking fewer hours to build. So it doesn't solve all of the issues in our housing market. I don't think any one policy would. But what this does is both lower construction costs and speed up the approvals process.
You mentioned the labor process, and having a less intensive labor process would be great to build more houses more quickly, because you've spoken about the lack of skilled trades and how that's affecting the housing market. Where are we seeing that more promptly? Where's that most apparent that the lack of skilled trades is hurting housing building?
Yeah, well, we're hearing it directly from builders and developers who have projects they'd like to build, but they can only get so many crews. So they might have 3 apartment buildings that they want to build, but they can't build them all simultaneously. They're having to do them one at a time, which slows down the process. So, if we're going to double or triple home building, what the CMHC says that we need to do, obviously, one of the ways of doing that would be to double or triple the numbers of electricians and plumbers and so on. But that's really not that realistic. And in fact, we are having trouble just keeping the number of skilled tradespeople flat because there are so many retirements. There are so many baby boomers who entered the industry in the 1970s who are retiring these days. So, just keeping the pool of skilled trades workers to what it is has been a challenge. So it's not realistic to double or triple that. So we've got to find ways to build homes more productively so we can best utilize the labor that we do have.
You write here, we should view this strategy as an investment, not a cost, as the economic opportunities are enormous. New housing will allow workers to live closer to opportunities, and scaling up these technologies creates manufacturing jobs across Canada and new products to export worldwide. It seems like you're saying that these housing solutions that you're proposing and that some of the government is taking, it'll go well beyond just housing in terms of the benefits we could see as a society.
Yeah, absolutely. That we have a number of manufacturing plants across Ontario. There's a fantastic one in St. Thomas, for instance. Building modular homes and components for homes. If we can include some of those components in this catalog, this creates a market for those products, allows these companies to scale up, create jobs, develop new products, which then hopefully get exported around the world. So the same thing that we're doing with, say, EV battery technology, we could do the same thing for, housing panels or 3D printed homes or mass timber. So we should absolutely look at this as an opportunity for regional economic development. And again, one that doesn't cost the government a lot of money. This is not, billions and billions of dollars of subsidies. This is the CMHC spending a little bit of time and effort working with architects, creating a catalog, and helping sort of catalyze new home construction.
Now, let's go a little bit more local. Let's talk provincially, because Doug Ford has repeatedly said 1.5 million homes. We've heard that number so much. CMHC is saying 5.8 million homes by 2030. Is that doable? Is that even possible? Can we build that many homes by 2030?
It's going to be an uphill battle. So this is an assessment of what we need, and it's going to be a challenge. So to put the 1.5 million number into context, we've never built more than 850,000 homes in any 10-year period in Ontario's history. And in fact, the last time we built even 750,000 homes in any 10 years was between 1973 and 1982. So 40 to 50 years ago. So, to be able to double that in the same amount of time really does take a wartime or post-war type effort. So I don't think we should underestimate the challenge, but we should also recognize that is necessary to support a growing population. So we need to do whatever we can to get as close as possible to that figure. Will we hit it? It's going to be really tough, but we've got to try and get as close as possible.
That growing population, that immigration, also includes international students. And we've heard a lot lately about the number of international students that are coming. We saw an ombudsman report that said, specific universities are at risk of, some financial problems if the international students were to slow down. Here in Hamilton, we have McMaster, we have Mohawk, we have Fanshawe, and the number of international students. Can you just put into perspective how students, particularly international students, affect the housing markets in these sorts of cities?
Yeah, right now what we've seen is a number of colleges in particular, a little less so the universities, though there are some universities like University of Toronto, for instance, that have really scaled up international students. But on the college side, you are seeing some college campuses that are now 80%, 80, wow, international students. So we've really scaled up the enrollments of the colleges, but we're not building the housing necessary to support an increased student population, whether or not they be domestic students or international students. So it's causing challenges in a number of markets. So my hometown of London is a prime example that over the last 3 summers, every summer, we're seeing the rent on new leases go up by about 10%. Just in the matter of weeks. So, we've seen, that compounded over 3 years. That's a 40% increase in rents in very short time. So it's creating all of these challenges. And you're seeing, students who might be living 12 or 15 to a house and just living in these overcramped conditions. So, we really need to do better to align our international student policies with our housing policies to make sure that we don't have this disconnect, that the student population isn't growing faster than our housing stock.
Now, you've mentioned the disconnect, and sometimes it feels like going back to the province, the province and the federal government are at odds, and the federal government will announce something, and then you'll have the Ford government say, well, that's not going to help. How do they get on the same page? They're trying to solve the same issue, which is housing affordability and more houses. Why do they seem at such odds when there seems to be solutions that are right there?
Yeah, it is frustrating. And one of the reasons why, the international student population was able to grow so much is that it's kind of within joint jurisdiction, that the higher education sector is governed by the province. But for an international student to come, they need a student visa, and those rules are set by the federal government. And whenever you have these kind of joint jurisdictions, it allows governments to kind of point fingers at each other and say that it's the other order of government that should be fixing this because they're causing the problem. So I think that's frustrating. It's definitely frustrating, and I think it's a problem. So I'm hopeful that the federal government and the province can get their act together. And if we go back to this catalog example, I was actually really heartened to see Provincial Housing Minister Calandra congratulate Minister Fraser on the new catalog idea and commit provincial support to helping out wherever they can. So I think that's a good sign, and I'm hopeful to see the federal government and province work together because you're right, they have shared interests in this. Neither order of government wants to see the housing crisis continue, so they really need to be working together better.
I want to go back to something you mentioned in terms of what could be done with these catalog of homes. Mass timber, what is that, and how could that be a potential solution or a potential expedition to getting these houses built? Mass timber, what is that?
Yeah, so mass timber is relatively new technology. So it's basically you take wood, you compress it down, you glue it into little parts, and it creates these kind of like 2x4s and other wood components, but they don't behave like wood because they're so compressed and glued together. They're very fire resistant. They're very strong. And we're seeing across the globe all kinds of new projects like 6-story apartment buildings and so on, built out of these materials, and they have some potential benefits. They're easier to put together than many sort of traditional apartments. One developer likens it to assembling IKEA furniture, where you just take all of these components and put them all together. So we are seeing the uptake of that increase. The British Columbia government has just legalized mass timber apartments up to 18 stories. But one of the challenges, there's a number of challenges to these. One of them is the lack of designs, that not many people have built these things. But as well, because not many people have built them, they're actually hard to get construction financing and insurance for. And this is where that catalog could be very helpful. If the CMHC could say, okay, here's a 6-story mass timber design, and if you build this thing, you will be eligible for finance and insurance at these kind of preferential rates. You could start to see these technologies increase, which would be very beneficial to regions that produce a lot of mass timber, which is right now is mostly British Columbia, but it could certainly be expanded in places like Northern Ontario.
You mentioned the 4 kind of housing units that St. Catharines, the city of St. Catharines, just down the road, recently approved that the infill policy to put more properties on more houses on single properties. How do we fight back against NIMBYism? Is that a real problem, NIMBYism, and how do we fight it?
Yeah, well, I think that is a challenge, and one of the ways it is getting fought is by allowing them as of right. So it's, if you now want to build a 4-plex in one of these communities, again, like a St. Catharines or a London, you're just able to do it. But I do think we need to get the general public more comfortable with these. That there's always fear of the unknown, and I think that's completely reasonable. And again, this is, I think, where the catalog of designs could certainly help. That if we come up with some attractive designs for this, that we could show people and say, this is what a 4-plex would look like in your neighborhood, and we've designed it in such a way that it really doesn't look any different than a traditional single detached home, just has 4 units to it. I actually then think people get more comfortable with the idea. So I think that's one way that, people always have fear of the unknown. And if we can make these ideas more tangible, less scary, I think that can go a long way to increasing public acceptance.
Mike, I got time for one question. It was going to be about, your tips for your hair, because I could definitely use them. But I'm going to ask about those jerseys behind you with a couple of gold medals. What am I looking at back there?
So those are dodgeball jerseys. Dodgeball. So Canada has a national dodgeball team. As ridiculous as it sounds, it is absolutely true. I was head coach of our national team back in 2013 and 2014, and we won international gold. We beat the Americans both times in the final, 2013 in New Zealand and 2014 in Hong Kong. As for the hair, I've got some really bad hat head right now. I'm currently in Ottawa. I had my toque on to walk the kids to school, so it's kind of everywhere right now. But I'm 46. I still have my hair, and because of that, I'm gonna show it off.
Hey, listen, I'm 31. I'm gonna keep it, But I'm also against the clock here because I just put product in, and it pops up actually if the show goes too long. So, Professor Moffatt, I really appreciate your insights. They are great. Learned a lot today, and I appreciate you making the time. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me.
That is Mike Moffatt, and my appreciation for him for joining today's show. And my thanks to you as well. My thanks to Mike Corson for directing. Make sure to like and subscribe to CHCH Podcast so you never miss an episode of this show or any of the other great shows we have for you, including the Trending Now podcast, which you catch a brand new episode this Friday. You can also catch the Morning Live Rep. That's all available on CHCH Podcast. Once again, wherever you get your favorite podcasts or chch.com/podcast. From all of us here at CHCH, I'm Louie Butko. Have a great day.